My name is Charles. My friends call me Chuck. My family calls me Junior. I'm a 43-year-old divorced father of a 7-year-old son by the name of Jordan. I'm an author, a poet, musician, and now a filmmaker. I grew up in a small city in North Carolina called Winston-Salem, affectionately known as Trey Foe. I lived in a predominantly black neighborhood. I'm the youngest of 5 children. I had what you would call a pretty regular childhood for a black male. Both of my parents were hardworking individuals. My father was a maintenance supervisor, and my mother worked for the local electric company. We attended church on a regular basis until I moved out. I've always loved music and became an accomplished musician by the time I was a teenager. It was around the 6th grade, though, that I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how to express it. Years later, even though I rarely studied and smoked weed my entire senior year, I somehow managed to graduate from high school in 1994. By the time I was 21, I was out on my own. But even then, years later, I knew something was still wrong. I was sad a lot. I was down a lot. I felt broken a lot. And more times than I want to acknowledge, I felt suicidal. Everything changed on a Sunday morning in the year 2002.
I would say I was in middle school when I kind of knew that something was wrong. I would just get sad for no reason for like very long periods of time. I would come home from school and go out and play. And I think back then, because it wasn't a prevalent issue, or the attention was not put on it back then as it is now. My parents, they didn't really notice anything wrong. And you got to understand, I mean, they were consumed with bills and stuff like that. So it may have been a thing where they just didn't notice. But that was when I knew then that something was wrong. But I mean, as a kid, as a teenager, you just think, you know, it's it's just me being sad.
Depression is not a character flaw. Depression is real. Something is going on in your brain that is imbalanced. So you can't just kind of pull yourself out of this. You need support. Sometimes you need medication, and you need real coping strategies that could work for you.
The reality is most of our kids have not been adequately either diagnosed, or they've not been in spaces where we can adequately say, specifically speaking to that. I think that it's a lot of young black males today that things that we have tried to discipline, things that we have tried to pray over, things that we have tried to just kind of like wave off as like just mood, or just some levels of just being not connected and not want to deal with us or whatever, I think has been some serious issues.
I remember when the moment in my life where I kind of knew that something was wrong, and that would be I was in the 6th grade, and I would just I went through a long period of time where I was just sad all the time, and I didn't know why. I didn't know why. All I knew was that, I mean, this went on for like months. And because depression was not as relevant a subject as it is now, back then you just think, I know, puberty, whatever, I was just sad. But like, I remember going through a very, very, very deep period of sadness.
Do you recall a moment in time when you had like the most, when depression hit you and it was just so devastating that not only did, of course, you notice, but other people around you noticed?
Yeah, yeah. I think that was when I was 26, and which was actually the year that I was officially diagnosed. But I was 26 years old, and this had went on for about 3 weeks. The young lady I was dating at the time noticed, uh, and it was at that point to where I was like, okay, I need to go get some help. I distinctly remember, I was driving my car, and I was going this way, and the ambulance was coming this way with the lights on, and so it was coming this way, and I was getting ready to make a left turn, and I distinctly just heard a voice say, "Turn in front of the ambulance." And it was at that point I was like, "Whoa, this is this isn't normal." And I think it was the next day actually that I admitted myself and to the hospital to seek treatment, because it was, I had, that scared me because I had never heard that before.
I recall one evening while conversing with my frat brother, Deron Anderson, just sitting back and talking about life. He shared his story about when he suffered from depression. I've known Deron Anderson for about 20 years. We met in college. Deron, his wife, Trishawn, and their 2 kids, Lillian and Maximus, moved to North Carolina a few years back. While settling in what would now become their new home, he shared with me his experience in dealing with depression and how it nearly ended his marriage. So tell us when you first recall your first episode of depression.
Ooh, recall my first episode of depression. It was actually right after I moved, right after I got married. My wife and I, we moved to Indiana. Got married. 3 days later, drove 33 hours to Indiana. Got to Indiana, and we were excited. We just married, and we had a lot of issues that we had to address, but didn't. We're a new couple, and we got married, and we were just ready to live our lives. We moved to Indiana so we can, because my wife wanted to pursue her PhD, so I went to support her. But I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do when I got there. So while she was going to school, I was just trying to figure things out, trying to just figure myself out. I just left California, had my little Benz, had my apartment. I was good. And I got married, and things kind of went another way. She started going to school, going to classes, and I was just sitting at home, just not really doing anything. And I started really getting sad, like all the time. Like I was just sad, having bad days, being upset with her. And I was like, what is going on with me? And I think that's when I started to realize like something isn't right. Like I'm too sad too much. So I would say right after I got married, that's when it actually began.
After several months of not being able to find work, Deron, who at the time held a master's degree, decided to swallow his pride and get a job at the local McDonald's. This is where his life would change forever.
So, my husband was working at McDonald's, and I thought, it was very admirable of him, just because, he had a master's degree and we came from California. He was highly successful, but it was just really hard to break, into that culture of the Midwest and Indiana. And, and it wasn't like he wasn't trying to, get a job or anything, because he was applying to stuff just back to back to back to back. And it's like no one would give him a chance. So luckily he had saved up, a year's worth of rent for us in our apartment. And so we were good, I was making my little grad school change, and I'm thinking we're good, but he's like, I got to do something. I have to do something. I'm at home by myself. And I'm like, do whatever you want to do. Like, that's fine, And so he ended up getting a job at McDonald's. And
So I was working the drive-thru at McDonald's. By the way, some of the meanest people eat at McDonald's, but I was in their drive-thru, and I was working the drive-thru, and I heard this voice over my microphone. It sounded familiar, but I didn't really take no mind to it. There's a lot of people that, maybe from our church that came there, and I've seen them a few times. That didn't really bother me, but a car approached.
he was at work that morning, and I was like, I'm gonna go surprise him, thinking I'm like being that supportive wife, and we're gonna have a good time, we're gonna have a good laugh about this. He's gonna have me my McFlurry or whatever I was ordering. And so I did, I ordered, I'm all geeked and happy, and I can see him, he was at the second window, and he was smiling and laughing with his coworkers, and I was like, okay, it's gonna be a good day. And so I pulled up, to the window, and
and I turned, and it was my wife. And man, when I tell you that I broke, I've never, ever, ever to this day felt anything like that. I mean, for me, I was embarrassed, because my wife, she knew I worked for McDonald's, but she never actually, seen me at work. She seen me in my uniform, but she never actually seen me there. And I was okay with that, because I didn't want her to see me there, because I felt that I needed to be somewhere else. I felt that I needed to be making more money. I felt like I should have been driving a better car. But I handed her her food, and I ran outside, and I just bawled. I cried. I cried and I cried and I cried. And I came back into work, and my supervisor, she asked me if I was okay, and I said, I can't be here anymore, and I left. And that's when a lot of things started to change for me, in a negative way, anyway.
African American men don't know exactly what they're dealing with. So you may be irritable. You may not feel like getting out of bed today. You may lack motivation. You may not feel like hanging out with your friends or being around family. Those are all symptoms of depression, but because we're not aware of what depression looks like, we just don't address it.
he just gave me this look. It was just this blank stare, and his face got all red and his eyes got all red, and then he kind of curls his mouth up when he started to get emotional, and he handed me my bag and walked away. And I was like, this is not the reaction I was looking for. I was thinking we were gonna have a good laugh and thank you for coming to McDonald's and have a good day and all this, and it just wasn't that way at all. And I just felt horrible. I just did, because I didn't know what to do. Here I am, trying to support. I know it's not the ideal situation. I'm trying to make lemons out of lemonade, lemonade out of lemons. And that just didn't happen. And so at that point, I'm just I'm at a loss. I don't know what else to do.
I was mad at her, but I was actually mad at myself. I was embarrassed for myself. I didn't really care about how I dressed. I mean, I didn't shave. I didn't get haircuts. I walked around in my robe. Every time my wife came in, I had something to argue about, something, whether, I even accused her of cheating on me, with some of her PhD friends. And this was ongoing, for months. And eventually it got to the point where I had a lot of time on my hands. I had a lot of time. I mean, I went to work for 4 or 5 hours, okay? I came home, I didn't even look for a job. I didn't care anymore, And I just started to just have a long time. And what is that saying? You know, is something, a certain type of mind is the devil playground. Idle mind is the devil playground. That is definitely true. And I started to go to the kitchen. I seen like knives, you know, and I was like, why am I looking at this knife like that? You know, and then I was just kind of looking at this knife, and I'm like, okay, you know. But this happened over a period of weeks. Okay, then I started to just kind of play with knives. Eventually, I started kind of hitting the knife on my wrist, and I started kind of doing this, and I started using actually the blade in the knife. I started poking myself with the knife. I eventually put the knife down, and I ran to my couch, and I just bawled, and I just started saying, God, help me. Help me, there's something wrong with me. I didn't want to go see therapy. I mean, because we didn't have, like, she had school insurance, but it wasn't gonna really do anything for me, you know, so I just felt that I can just do it myself. And mind you, just because I put the knife down that day, doesn't mean it didn't happen the next day, right? This, it was an ongoing thing. And eventually I told my wife, because now my marriage was on the line, you know. Yeah.
You know, in my ignorance, I'm thinking, okay, depression is for people that live in mental institutions or people that have mental disabilities or mental disorders. And this can't be him because he's successful and he's my husband and I ain't married nobody with, you know, depression. But then, you know, just thinking back on all the times that we have had where I'd come home and he was crying or, you know, upset about something or just arguing with me or accusing me of things that I didn't do. And I'm like, I'm just trying to be here. I'm trying to go to school. I'm trying to take care of you. This is getting really hard. And it just became hard. And I think, you know, we just had that conversation, like, what are we going to do? You know, like, is this the end? You know, and we had a really rough couple days, you know, after that, to the point where it was like, what are you pushing me away? If that's the case, cool. Then I don't want to be here anymore.
There's always this, what's it called, this, the calm before the storm or something like that. Eventually it was like quiet in the house. It's real quiet. Like I would, you know, it's just like no energy of any sort whatsoever. And it hit, boom, like it just storms, everything. You know, it's just arguments, this and that. Like both of us, I was drawing her into my energy of just hate. And I wanted her to say, I'm leaving. I wanted her to say that.
And I remember he told me to say those words. Tell me that you want a divorce. And I remember saying, I want a divorce. But in my mind, I was like, you don't want a divorce? Like, this is just weird for you right now. And you're not prepared for none of this. And you know, in my mind, I'm like, this is what you want. You do want this. But that other person besides you is like, no, you know, you could do this. You're in school and you're successful. You could be doing this. You could be doing that. It's like having those little people on your shoulders, you know, and it's like, who do I listen to? But I knew what I wanted. I knew what I wanted in my life. I knew he was a good man. I knew I wanted to break generational cycles. I knew that I wanted a family, you know, I wanted for us to be great. I knew that we were like a puzzle that fit together. And I knew that I had to work on some things, you know, in order to help him be supportive. And I also knew that he needed to work on some things. And so it was just like, well, we gonna do this? And eventually it was like, no, you know, like we're worth saving. Like we are worth being together. We know that God has, you know, destined us for greatness. We just need to fight through this.
But we came to a decision that our marriage is worth fighting for. We found us a church. And although, you know, our pastor, we didn't agree on everything too often. He was there to help, and my wife, she was always there. She was always there to support me, and that's what I think men need. Men don't need to be told what to do. Men just need a hand to hold. You know, men just need someone to hear them out. Men just need someone to be weak, being able to feel safe to be weak in front of, and that's what I needed. I needed someone to be there so I can be weak.
And I didn't mind him just laying his head in my lap every so often, just to feel the warmth of a woman, you know, or just to feel a sense of security. And I think it took a lot of me just kind of backing down my pride and everything I had worked for, and trying to be this strong Black woman and just being vulnerable with him. And I think when two people are allowed to be vulnerable together, it just builds you back up to be even stronger. So I think for women, it's okay to see your man cry. It's like, I would rather him cry with me than to be crying with some other chick on the side, and not coming to me with those vulnerable feelings and thoughts. And so I want to create that open space for him.
So really, just personally, it just saddens me when I see somebody come into my office, a Black male especially, and they just do not know how to express themselves. Just the emotional turmoil that you see with Black men when they try to express themselves, it just kind of pulls at your heartstrings in a different way, because it's almost as if they feel stuck. They feel stuck because they don't know if they should be seeking help. They don't know exactly how to label what they're dealing with, because it's not really something tangible that you can like see. So I would say that as a community, we need to make sure that we are embracing our Black men in a different way.
You say life's been hard on you. Well, brother, I got news. It's hard on me too. We seem to face the same old issues. Some are just surface, some deeper in the tissue. And I know slavery has played its part. Word, being separated and subjugated. And that passes to the brain of our child. So I want to step off what was and start with the right now. You say the world just don't understand, but I ain't the world, my love. I'm your woman. And I know how deep it really goes, trying to tread on a dream when the water feels low. And oh, if our ancestors can walk barefoot, afraid in the dark, for miles and 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 miles, I know we can do this. Come on, let's start. I want to be real with you. I want to get healed with you. I want to grow up with you. I want to be more with you. Be what's in store for you. Open the doors with you to a true healing. Can you imagine the feeling? The sky ain't a ceiling at all.
When we first started working on this documentary, I knew that I wanted to talk to a couple of the guys that I grew up with. One of those dudes happened to be my man, Lamont Joe. Lamont and I both grew up on the north side of Winston-Salem. Went to high school together and also played basketball at the same rec from time to time. After doing a few stints in prison and racking up a few felonies, Lamont decided to turn his life around. Now working on his master's degree in counseling, I knew Lamont would be a good resource for us to talk about how depression plays a role in men that have been in prison and also people in everyday life. Corbin and I took a trip one Saturday just to go chop it up with my man Lamont.
Far as I can remember back, man, it started for me is when my mom and my dad, they were together, they were married, and I don't know what the event was, but they decided to split up. They were having an argument, and my mom was dropping my dad off, and when she was dropping him off, he said, "Let me get my sons." And when he did that, he tried to reach back in and tried to grab one of us, but he grabbed my arm. And when he grabbed my arm and tried to pull me out the car, my mom grabbed my other arm to keep me in the car. And of course she was driving, so as she was pulling off, my dad had to let go. And so, when that happened, all I know is just going with my mom and being with her. I would go see my dad occasionally, but he was off into his world. He really started drinking real bad and hanging in the streets. And as I got older, I was seeing that my mom had her own addiction too.
Yeah.
So we would be in, we would end up being in different households because my mom was off, running. So it was me and my little brother. And so we did that, man. Then she moved to a different side of town. So she had got her life together and moved to a different side of town. And but by the time she had done that, me and my little brother was off and running in the streets.
Adverse childhood experiences such as having a parent that's incarcerated or a parent that's on drugs or living in the environment can have traumatic effects on people, specifically, gang related areas, and you have to live for survival. Those things cause anxieties and depressions, and it hasn't been recognized in the African American community. So therefore, a lot of mental health diagnoses have been swept under the rug, and it's time for us to change that atmosphere.
The younger generation, I would take a little blame. Even the kids that are coming up under me still have mental health that's being not diagnosed. But the reason I say is at crisis level, because now they're killing each other, but not knowing that some of them may have an underlying mental health diagnosis. But again, how do we cope with that? By doing negative things. I don't want to face reality, so I'll cope with it the way I see what I see on TV or hearing a rap song. This is what's going to get me away from identifying with my real feelings, is just living this type of lifestyle.
This stuff, it's not good. You can't tell me that it's good. Okay, popping pills, drinking. I'm not saying you can't have a drink, but it's what you do in access, and certain things are just not good. You can't tell me that taking these barbiturates are a good thing. These things will put you to sleep, and you may not wake up. So I think a part of that is people are trying to escape, and I think there's a certain media and social media dynamic that goes along with it that creates this atmosphere for that. I think there's a plan behind that too, in my opinion.
You got kids that get caught up in the social media, the Facebook, the likes, all of these things. That if your picture don't get enough likes, well, people don't like me. Now we're impacted by the self-esteem. So, it's a dual thing with that too. So I'm not promoting the use of internet, but I'm saying that some people find comfort in that, but we also have to watch that too, because the internet is causing a lot of problems for kids today. And whether it's being bullied, whether they're being teased, whether, my self-esteem is being impacted because people not liking my picture, how many friends I have, all of those things contribute to the way that, a person feels.
Most black men have three types of dudes in their life. You got your friends, you got your homies, and then you got your brothers. Bron O'Gary happens to be my brother. I met Bron back in 2005 while working in corporate America. And though we initially bonded on a musical level, Bron has become one of the closest friends I have. We talk music, we talk life, we talk politics, we talk religion, we talk sports, and pretty much anything. Bron is not only one of my son's favorite uncles, he's probably one of the most intelligent men I know. I wanted Bron to come on this documentary and speak about a number of things, but most importantly, the effects that corporate America can have on a black man's mental health, the current administration, and other things.
Being in corporate America and how that actually affects our mental health outside of the job as well as on the job.
Well, first of all, I think in being in corporate America, where you know that you're qualified to do the job, you still feel like you have to be better. you never feel that what you do is good enough. Always feel like you have to be better. And I say that because there's this atmosphere in corporate America that lingers that says, well, the reason you have this job amongst a lot of your white counterparts is because you're black, because they have to show that there's some diversity here. So first of all, that's why you're here. Like there's this thing sometimes maybe that kind of lingers, that's why you're there, and it's not because you're qualified. But you know deep down inside that not only are you qualified, but you're more qualified. Then when you get there and you find out that you're even more qualified than some people that may be even above you, but there are certain aspects that show you that they're not going to promote you. Like there are certain things that are going around you where you know that really you should be a level above where you're at that time, but you keep getting passed over for promotion, or they don't look to promote you, or they're looking elsewhere. So you feel that. But then also you feel that if it comes to speaking out on a certain issue, if it comes to speaking out on unfairness, if it comes to speaking out on character and integrity, that you have to watch how you speak, because you don't want people to think what is already in probably a lot of people's mind, that you're the typical angry black male. So the way you carry yourself has some apprehension, which you should never have to worry about, okay, if I speak up, that I may sound like a typical black man, typical angry black male, so I don't even want to speak up on the issues.
I tell people, I don't think the average person really understands the amount of restraint that us as black men have to exercise on a daily basis. Like on a daily basis, we spend a great majority of our day without the ability to be authentic and genuine. For 8 hours a day, I can't really be myself. You know what I'm saying? And I look at some of my most of my like white coworkers and white counterparts, and I'm like, these dudes get to be their genuine selves every day, but I can't do that. You know what I'm saying? I can't talk to these clients and these these customers that I work for and be Charles. So I have to transform every day.
We're going to rebuild our inner cities because our African American communities are absolutely in the worst shape that they've ever been in before, ever, ever, ever. You take a look at the inner cities, you get no education, you get no jobs, you get shot walking down the street.
In this current political climate, since Trump AD, so to speak, people have gotten very bold with these type of things. So that puts added pressure on black men. Not only the pressure of, okay, where does that leave us now? Because now we know how people really feel about us. But if we act in a certain manner, well, we knew they were going to act that way anyway. The angry black man syndrome. So it's like, okay, should I speak up, or should I just lay low and not say anything? Because they think we're going to be angry and going to respond that way anyway. So that puts added pressure. Not only because we think that people are against us because they're showing that they're against us, but also if we act a certain way, we have to be guarded in that manner too. So it's like a catch-22, in my opinion.
So it was, I thought about something the other day. I was watching the news, and a lot of like my friends and people close to me, they may come to the house. They always tell me that I watch too much news.
Corbin even tells me that actually. But you know, with the political climate that's happening today, you know, I was watching the news the other day, and you know, it just dawned on me that it was really depressing, you know, just to see the blatant, you know, racism and you know, hate, you know, that's coming from this particular administration. And even with that, you know, you start to, you know, look at those characteristics and stuff, and you see how it's emboldening, you know, a lot of people to kind of come out of their racist closet. And so I made this post on Facebook, and you know, I said, you know, this administration is really just it's kind of caused me to go into a depression, and some of the same, you know, people that were you know, that particularly, you know, comment on my stuff on a regular basis was saying that they had kind of experienced that as well.
I mean, the fact that we live in a country where we could elect a 46-1, and that has created trauma, stress for a community that historically has always been already traumatized and under so much stress. Right. And so right now, I mean, my counseling load has just elevated like crazy. And when I think about it, a lot that is behind it is the kind of nation we live in right now. And
we're in the United States of anxiety as we speak.
I've been in this practice, I've been doing therapy for 12 years, and I'm very successful at what I do, and I help people. But when I get in my car and I drive down the street and I see Mr. Police Officer on the side, I go straight to my rear view mirror, and for about 4 blocks, I'm looking in that rear view mirror at the risk of not seeing what's in front of me. You know, I'm driving, but I'm so much focused on in my rear view, is he about to pull me over? Here it is. I'm not a criminal. I'm not engaged in any criminal activity, but just the sight of a police officer triggers anxiety for me, because he's going to pull me over for something.
Then when we get off of work, or when we leave the office after dealing with that stuff, so you deal with all those added dimensions, and then you get off work or get away from your occupation or career, and then you come home and deal with stuff, or you deal with stuff out in the world, off the job. And so it's just added stress, added pressure, added impact to your life. And notwithstanding if you're dealing with some health issues. So that just adds to it. And so it's a lot to have to fight. And man, we've been fighting for a long time. And it seems like in 2019, about to be 2020, man. It's about to be 2020. We're still dealing with some of these same issues that should have been gone a long time ago. It just does not make sense at all. I mean, it seems like it's conjuring up. Yeah. Seems like we're starting over, like we're going back to early 19th century or something like that.
I think that black male depression is the most common mental disorder that black men are plagued with today here in North America and abroad. And I think that when you look at black male depression or anything, you got to go to the root of the problem. For every cause, there's an effect. And I think a lot of black men suffer from post-slavery, from 400 years plus to the present. There's a lot of things that affect black men because of that.
Of course, you got to think about it. If we were brought over or slavery was brought over, you know, they went through the depression that they went through, having to, you know, live through slavery. And then that was just passed down through generation. And again, mental health was not diagnosed or looked at or even thought about back then. But that's just being passed down and passed down. So if I went through it and I'm raising my son, but I don't know what I'm doing, I'm raising my son that way. When he have a son, he's going to do it when that son. So yes, I feel like it's being passed down from slavery.
A lot of times black males have to deal with what's called historical trauma. So historical trauma stem from slavery. So what we know during slavery is that African-American males were treated as if they were property. They had no control over anything in those times. And if you think about how that relates to even current times, it's still some of those same dynamics.
Many black men such as myself grew up in the black church. Every Sunday morning, whether we wanted to or not, we had to go. It was tradition, and it was supposedly the right thing to do. Some of us were young musicians, some of us were on the junior usher board, and some of us were on the youth choir. Some of us eventually strayed away from the church, while others went on to become deacons, ministers, and even some pastors. I've often asked myself over the years if the church failed black men in relation to dealing with their mental health and their emotions properly. Black churches are typically places filled with high emotion and a high level of feminine energy, while the men sit on the boards, count the money, and maintain the foundation of the edifice.
In psychology, there are psychiatrists and whatnot. They will tell you that churches probably see 300% more as many patients as they see. And so, particularly speaking, I think that for us to be one of the largest containers of black men in America, we're totally missing that. And I think that oftentimes most of the leadership is not adequately dealt with their own emotions. So I think automatically we're not even in the reality of it. I was just listening to a podcast talking about 10 reasons why women make better pastors. Women are nurturers. Women actually have the capacity to see when you're actually hurting. Men particularly, we're going to get the job done. You know, we're going to check the list off and we're going to go home and take a nap. I mean, the reality, we're totally missing the emotional piece. And I will even say, even in the spaces that I've been with men, even in men's meetings and men's retreats, we totally go at the actual act of sin. We actually go at, we never really talk about what may have allowed those things to happen. We never really talk about, you know, and the Bible says, you know, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. We really don't talk about how he thinks about himself, right? We really never engage that. And what we're really trying to get at is, don't think on this, don't think on that, don't think on this. But the reality is there's some other things behind there.
The church talks a lot about relying on God, especially Christianity. So relying on God, looking up to that higher power, seeking him, you know, giving everything to this higher power, and eventually you'll start to feel better, or that should heal you, or praying. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're not dismissing treatments that are actually successful, such as medication management. So it's okay if you pray and you seek help from a higher power, but if you need medication like antidepressants, then you need to be prescribed those, and you need to take those, and you need to follow up with treatment.
You think the church is doing enough?
I believe they are, but what I seen even down at this conference, we went to the church that Martin Luther King's father was a pastor at, and this was the first time for me personally that I seen a pastor that was also a therapist. Wow, so okay. I think that the churches are doing what they can, but I think now with the heightened awareness of depression in the black community, there are starting to be therapists that they're starting to put that therapy piece with the church. And I think with the church being receptive of that, is saying, because I think the old tradition was just pray about it. Don't get me wrong, some people did the whoop about it, then some people say, hey, just pray about your depression or whatever mental health you're going through. They got to pray it out of you. But now they're saying that that's just not so, it's just not that easy. You know, if you pray, but then you don't do anything to work on your depression, take your mental health, take your medication, you know, do some insight, do some reflecting, you know, really try to manage it with both of them. No offense to the churches, but the prayer just not alone is not going to work. So yes, I think they're doing what they can and doing, but now I think with them being receptive to say, hey, we do need a therapy piece to this so that the person can work on it, and with the help of medication. Again, I know me, medication was frowned upon. I don't want to take no meds. You know what I'm saying? Nah, they trying to just give meds. Don't get me wrong, we definitely understand that there are some bad physicians, but medication will help. So I think with the church saying, hey, we need therapy. Hey, let's be open to taking medication. Now, instead of just saying, take the Bible and pray. So I think the church is starting to make that shift to start helping with depression as well.
So again, I think that mind state operates from I think there's before and there's after, right? So what we talking about is before. If you look at statistically now in the way that therapy is being accepted, not only in the African American community, but also from a religious standpoint, it's becoming dual. So now I have clients that come in here and their pastor specifically ask them to seek individual counseling. Wow. So I have clients coming here saying, hey, my pastor told me to come in here. So the agreement that we make with those clients in a respectful way, I'm not ordained, so I don't do any biblical references and all that. Now we may use techniques that may have worksheets and stuff that have biblical references, but it's kind of like I stay in my lane and allow the pastor to stay in his lane. So a lot of times we'll co-communicate. We'll do joint conversations, me and a pastor. So I think the trend now, as therapy is becoming more open in the community, that even pastors are understanding and respecting the need to have a trained individual that can help you deal with things from a worldly perspective, because most of their insight is coming from a religious foundation. So I think even in that, pastors are understanding that the typical pray it away, put it in God, we need a little bit more than that. So I think as we continue to progress up the line with this becoming more accepted, that process is going to go away and is going to be pushed to go to therapy.
And there has been many cases where men have actually come up and said, yo, I dealt with this as a young person, or I dealt with this. And particularly because we are not adequately trained, we're not adequately connected to that reality of how to handle mental health, we kind of just blow by it, and we say we can pray and we can believe God, and guaranteed you will leave that altar experience the exact same, or maybe even worse, because now there's shame in the sense of now I can't even talk to you about it because I don't even feel like you're hearing me. I don't think that we have the ears to hear when people, because we're so champion to what we can do. We're so champion to what we can say that we have done to help this individual. But when this person tells you that that's not helping me, you feel as if since I can't fix it, I don't want to deal with it, right? And it's almost like you're shunned in the ministry. You're kind of pushing this back corner. And it's funny, I've been in several conversations over the years on cases in our church that I know that these young men, black men as well as adult men, were on some levels of medication. And I've heard the conversation of casting things out. And I've thought, how uneducated are we as spiritual leaders to think that you can just drive out that? And it took me some time to listen to some true people that did deliverance back in the day, like the Derek Princes and those guys. And the reality was Jesus didn't really deal with that much that kind of case. These might have been people that were dealing with something spiritual, not something physical or something, So the reality is we always try to push it to some kind of deliverance scripture. And the reality of it is we have not been equipped and we've not had enough people to school us on that true reality.
So where does this lead us? Mental illness in the black community has been largely overlooked, avoided, misdiagnosed, cast off as crazy, and to a certain degree, shunned. Some of us, such as myself, are born with symptoms. Others of us have had traumatic experiences that have reconfigured our chemical makeup just to adapt. Our anxieties are heightened, our hearts are heavy, and our minds are clouded from intermittent episodes of seemingly inescapable peril. Sometimes, the only thing we feel that can make it better is to simply not be able to feel at all.
When we talk about suicide and different things like that, suicide statements, okay, over here as a trained professional, I learned how to do a suicide assessment, but people say, I want to kill myself. We feel like that sometimes. I want to die. That's a natural feeling. That's, some things happen and you may feel like I just can't take it and I wish I was dead. That doesn't mean that you're suicidal. But that means that something happened in your life that's so traumatic that you would think of not being here, and that needs to be processed.
So we think about suicide. Black men are more likely to attempt suicide than white males when they're suffering with depression. They're about 20% more likely to attempt suicide than their white counterparts. And again, because they feel like, okay, I can't get support from church. I can't get the support from my family. They don't believe depression exists. They believe you have to just be stronger, or it's somehow a character flaw.
My personal opinion, these is not facts. What I am starting to see is that some people, some black men especially, are looking at the totality of where society is today and where they fit in or lack thereof of not fitting in. I'm trying to do this, and then as we know, social media, regular media, this is the American dream, the ideal situation. You should be doing this. Yeah. With a person, a black man that, hey, for one, they're making it hard for me to accomplish that, and then the chances of me getting there are so slim. So do I even want to try to fight this battle?
If I die right now, it might not be such a bad thing. Like, who's going to care? If I die right now at this moment, so be it. I mean, that's the way I felt. And it took a while for me to dig up out of that.
And I can say, if it wasn't for the grace of God, which is number one, and my wife, I promise you, I would not be sitting here right now. I guarantee that.
And we took that leap and we did it, and almost 10 years later, like, we're still here, honeymoon phase isn't over yet, still in love, still makes me laugh and all that, but it's definitely something that we had to work for.
Yeah, I said, like, if Jay-Z say wear button-up shirts, everybody went out and got button-up shirts. Yeah. When Jay-Z wore the Yankees hat, everybody had the Yankee hat. Now you got Jay-Z saying, go to therapy. I have issues. I have commitment issues. I cheated on my wife. I do these things. I need help. I had to go sit down to somebody and express what I need. So now most of the people in the streets that's sitting back listening to Jay-Z, they're like, yeah, I want to call a therapist. I want to go talk to somebody because this person said it was cool. This person said what I need to do. I'm not bad for feeling that way. And it's going on so strong that, one out of maybe 5 young African American students that I get in here are now going into psychology. That's what they want to be. They want to be a therapist. Part of that is the foundation that I bring for them coming in here with their problems, and then we talk about it. But a lot of them just spark. So I think in the next 10 to 20 years, this field is going to be so full of African American therapists.
So that's the approach I took. I would always think, is it worth me turning to this or doing that in the third? I would lay that out there first, and I would see what would be more important. My son was important. So I kept my son in my mind during the whole time. And like I say, along with that, exercising, eating a good diet, meditating, surrounding myself with other positive brothers is what kept me strong during the whole situation, the whole process of the depression that I was faced with at that time.
What we need to realize is that as men, you're not in that survival mode anymore. Like, you don't have to just survive. You can live. You can manage your emotions. You can understand what it's like. You can be a little bit more vulnerable in situations. So in our communities, we need to take our men in, our Black men in, with open arms. Embrace them.
Okay, oh no, first I can't catch a breath. Feel the moisture as I begin to sweat. I start feeling dizzy like my balance left. And now my heart's beating like it's out my chest. It's happening again, it's happening again. but you can't tell nobody, they gon' think you crazy. It's happening again, it's happening again. Just let it pass, boy, you be good. Waking up's a struggle, I used to wanna hustle. I used to want the whole world to know that I existed. Now I cuddle in the bed with myself, hoping the phone don't ring, hoping the text don't come through, or email don't bling. I feel funny, shouldn't I be happy? I get money. Instead I put on all new clothes and feel crummy, but I'm showing up for work like I'm A-OK. Anxiety, who, me? No way, Jose. I hide behind a smile while my mind is running wild. Nervous for no reason, heart beating like a mile a minute. Where's the nearest bathroom? I'm in it. Splash some water on my face, wipe it dry, let's get it. That's my life in a nutshell. Feel like I'm going nuts, well, let's keep it on the low. Can't let them know that you ain't upscale. I shouldn't even carry real ID. Forgot what it feels like to really feel like me.